Well, hello, everybody. I'm Janet Ivey from Janet's Planet, and we are coming to you live from Antarctica. And the fine folks who are presenting this are Future of Space and Space2Sea. Their core mission is basically to just enhance the human experience and elevate the conversation. We hope today sparks creativity and some curiosity. And thank you to all 46 countries who have registered and are viewing, and hello to all the students of the globe. And to make sure that we have the most time for all the questions that were submitted, I'm going to make these introductions very brief, but they in no way encapsulate the many accomplishments of these fine people here. If you would give me the honor, I'll hold your applause and then we'll give them a rousing round once we are done, if you can help yourselves, but you can applaud if you'd like. First, we had the man who commanded the Enterprise and made us all want to beam up, the one and only legendary actor, director, and astronaut, Mr. William Shatner, who made us all dream of exploring the galaxy. So should I call you Captain or Mr. Shatner?
Billy Boy will be.
And you can call me Bill is his documentary. It's streaming on Amazon Prime. It's a must watch. So everybody put that on your watch list. And next to him is probably the globe's favorite science communicator and astrophysicist who makes us all smarter because he makes things so relatable, Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Thank you.
And our next guest isn't just the one thing, she is an entire galaxy of things. Ocean advocate, documentary film director, producer, explorer, artist, public speaker, brand ambassador, jewelry designer, Miss Céline Cousteau. And Bill, you're not the only captain here today. Captain Scott Kelly is a naval aviator, electrical engineer, and NASA astronaut who spent 340 consecutive days in space, making for his total of days in space 520 cumulative. And he and his identical brother provided some incredible research and data as we continue to learn how humans will travel in space. So again, Captain Scott Kelly right there. And rounding out our illustrious panel is NASA astronaut José Hernández, who started out life as a migrant farm worker, then became an electrical engineer who helped develop techniques for the X-ray laser program. That sounds a lot like beaming us up, right? And after 12 applications, became a NASA astronaut. So, thank you guys again. Give them one big rousing round of applause. Yay! All right. So we're going to get started with the questions. And Bill, I'd love to start with you. Onay, who is 17 years old from Myanmar, and Mile, age 12 from Birmingham, England, had a very similar question. How did your role as Captain Kirk shape your real-life views on space exploration? And now, after your trip to space, how has your perspective on life changed?
That's a rather complex question, starting from when I was a boy to old age. What I'll answer, the question, that part of the question that strikes me is, how did going into space alter or change or mitigate feelings that I've had? Well, I've always been an ecologist. Rachel Carson wrote a book called Silent Spring. It's possible that she started the movement, the awareness in general public that this incredible planet that we're on, that the Greeks called Gaia, the goddess of the earth, indicating that it's a possibility in some aspects the planet is alive. It meets certain criteria in terms of currents, equalization of temperature, the salinity of the ocean is constant, the oxygen, all those things that we think of as principles of life. Earth has a great many of them. So maybe it isn't living, breathing, and going to generate a replica of itself, but one could think of Gaia as alive. And when you think of it that way, we humans living on the surface of Gaia are acting like a disease, and we're killing Gaia by our actions and not in not being aware of what we're doing. We humans have this duality of rage and intellect, and up to now, the rage, which is part of the desire for exploration and for new knowledge, that rage to do it, is killing the planet. We have to be aware of that and stop doing that. That's what the flight in space has made me more aware of than anything else.
Beautiful. All right, this one is for Céline. I'd love for you to answer this next question from 14-year-old Kat from Belgium and the Cosmic Girls Foundation. She says, when you are underwater and you look around, do you experience a cognitive shift similar to the overview effect that astronauts experience when looking down from space to Earth?
Well, that's a very sophisticated question for 14-year-olds. I love that. So I haven't been to space yet. What I feel underwater is very sensory. It isn't intellectual. And I will say the first thought I had with that question was an encounter with a humpback whale off the coast of Hawaii, when the whale and I came eye to eye. And it's very hard to explain, except that I realized that I exist in that moment, because this whale acknowledged seeing me, and I felt incredibly small. And that sense of feeling incredibly small, I wish upon all of you, because it really puts you in perspective of what we are. It's humbling, and at the same time, it's completely expansive. So if I were to pinpoint a cognitive shift, it would be in that moment. And there are plenty of others, but that kind of summarizes it for me.
Wow. Dr. Tyson, this one is for you. It comes from 15-year-old Hashim from Pakistan, and he wants to know, what is one unsolved mystery in space science that keeps you up at night? And what could its answer mean for our understanding of the universe? And are you an alien?
Yes.
Ultimately, we all came from space. So maybe we don't feel like we're aliens to each other, but to any other life form we discover, we are aliens to them. And so I'd like to think of us as just as alien as any next alien we ever discover. That's my first one. Second, I have a cop-out answer to that question.
Okay.
What one question do I want to see answered, and what effect would it have on all of us? My cop-out answer is, I used to think that way, and then we found the answers, and upon finding the answer, you realize you're standing in a new proscenium with farther view beyond what was previously your perimeter of ignorance. And then you get to ask new questions. And so what keeps me awake at night are not questions we have yet to answer, it's questions we have yet to ask.
Ooh, yes. Mic drop. Captain Kelly.
What kind of an answer is that?
Captain Kelly, this one is for you. It's from Namishka, age 15, from Mumbai. She asks, when you are out doing a 7-hour or more spacewalk, how do you center yourself and be mindful of the task at hand when the whole world is below you and present in your sight?
Well, Namishka, that can be pretty challenging when you're outside the spacecraft at 250 miles, going 17,500 miles an hour with this incredibly beautiful view, awe-inspiring view of the Earth. There was actually on the, I think it was the first spacewalk I did, there was one moment where I was on the robot arm and I couldn't see any of the space station behind me because, or actually I was on a foot restraint. I was going to work on the robot arm and they hadn't brought it up to me yet. And the whole space station was behind me, so it was kind of like that guy Jack on the Titanic on the front of the ship. I'm the king of the world. But then you have to understand you have a really serious job to do, and you just need to compartmentalize, focus on the things you can control, which is what's right in front of you, your suit, your tools, your procedures, the job you have at hand, and ignore, the immensity of everything you can see, which is challenging. But that's also like I think a skill that is important for every person in their life, whether they're an astronaut or whatever they're doing. Understand the stuff you can control and try to focus on that and ignore the distractions, whether they are beautiful or not. But at the same time, obviously important to appreciate the moment and the beauty of our planet.
Beautiful. Thank you. All right, astronaut Hernandez, these next two questions are for you because they really do complement one another. So Sophia, age 20 from Belgrade, Serbia, asked, what was the hardest part to overcome in order to become an astronaut? Was it academics, fitness, or something else?
Okay. Well, first of all, what Scott didn't tell you is, because I was watching him back at Mission Control, is that he did raise his arms and said, "I'm king of the world." But NASA chose not to show that footage. But no, I think what I would say is that probably the biggest challenge was myself. I think I got rejected 11 times before being selected as part of the 19th class of astronaut. And one of the things you tend to do is you start doubting yourself. You start having this imposter syndrome of saying, hey, do I really have what it takes to be selected and become a U.S. NASA astronaut? And I like to talk about this because I like to tell kids, failure is part of the process. Of not being selected the first time does not constitute you as a failure. You just got to keep trying and got to keep working hard to get closer to your goal. So you can't give up. And I always tell kids, remember my story. It wasn't till the 12th time. So don't give up, unless you're way beyond the 12th time. Just keep at it. Keep at it, and you eventually will reach your goal.
And this is from Celeste, age 13, from Guadalupe. You basically just answered her question, but would you do it for her in Spanish? About just how hard it was and how proud you are of where you...
Claro que sí. La pregunta es que si me he dado por vencido, qué es lo que me preocupaba más. Y lo que me preocupaba más para mí era que yo pensaba que tal vez no tenía yo la capacidad de ser seleccionado como astronauta y yo lo que me gusta contar esto a los jóvenes porque les digo que me rechazaron no una, dos ni tres veces, fueron 11 veces. Fue la 12ª que finalmente me seleccionaron como parte de la generación número 19 de astronautas y entonces es lo que quiero que piensen los jóvenes, que fallar es parte de la vida, es lo que uno aprende de esa falla y cómo se prepara para el segundo, tercero y cuarto intento es lo importante y que no se den por vencidos. Solamente de que hayan pasado 12 o 13 veces, entonces tal vez sí, pero antes de eso no. Gracias.
Gracias. Bill, I'm going to ask you to say the next one in Klingon. No. Hazra wrote, this is...
I was about to do it in Klingon.
Oh, sorry, okay.
I'm not going to do it now. Except to say thank you. Good job.
Kazra wrote, Captain Kirk is my hero. I live in Iran. I am 9 years old, and I wish to go to NASA. My goal is to be the first human to travel from Earth to Mars and beyond. What life advice do you have for me?
Don't go. The concept of wanting to go to Mars and beyond is a noble one. It shows aspiration, ambition, and use that to educate yourself. Get an education to do that, and then you'll have a myriad of choices other than going beyond Mars, which nobody in the United States has even contemplated yet. Going to Mars is going to be an aspirational task. We're going to send robots first, and then perhaps some brave human beings who will risk death and destruction, but use the idea of going into space and being part of the space program to increase your education.
Anna from Franklin, Tennessee with Borderless Arts. It's a superb program. Just wants to tell you she really enjoyed watching you go to space.
Thank you, dear. I appreciate that.
All right, Dr. Tyson, your turn. Andrea, age 15, from Finland, wants to know how you became a science communicator, and did you find out you were really good at it by practicing or speaking at conferences or something else?
Yeah, none of the above. Okay, so my first idea that I might be good at explaining things occurred in 8th grade, where in our math class, the math teacher taught matrices to people. And what seemed really obvious how a matrix works, no one else was understanding. And I thought the teacher wasn't explaining it as well as it could be. So then I volunteered to do so in front of the class. And then we said, oh, is that what it is? And so I asked myself, why did that work? I didn't really fully understand. Then I realized that if you're going to be an educator, you have to know something 10 times better. You have to know something in 10 different ways so that no matter who's in front of you, you can take a trajectory through the lesson plan that can best fit the receptors of who you're communicating with. If you only know information in one way and then you deliver it, people have to come to you. And that's not being an educator, that's being a lecturer. Now, in college, you can lecture in front of the board and people have to learn it because they paid to have to learn it. But the difference between a communicator and a lecturer, oh, by the way, after college, no one wants to be lectured to, right? Stop lecturing me. You're lecturing. That's a bad word after college. All right. So if instead you face the person and learn the ways that information, all the different ways that information can be received, you can become more potent as an educator. And what I realized is if I'm ever tasked with explaining something, the job of the person understanding it is on me. It's not their responsibility to know what I'm saying. It's my responsibility to have them understand me. And once you flip that, that's a whole other commitment. And I'm based in New York City, which is the center of all the major news gathering headquarters. I tell you how, it's a fast story. I'll try to make it fast. It's 1995. I just became director of the Hayden Planetarium. The first exoplanet is discovered. We have thousands now, but that was banner headlines, okay? ABC News sends a action cam, one of the mobile thing, up to the planetarium. They don't know me from anything. I just had title, director of the planetarium. They interviewed me about the exoplanet. And they said, well, how was it discovered? And I gave my best professorial reply, okay? Well, the Doppler shift, and there's a shift in the spectrum, and it was as though they were visiting me in my lecture hall, okay? Remember, this is a benchmark moment for me. So I do all of this, and then I say, and then once you analyze the data, and so what's going on? The planet and the star orbit a common center of gravity. It's not that the planet just orbits the star. You can't see the planet, it's too dim, but you can see the star. So if they orbit a common center of the gravity, the star is doing this. You can measure that. And if the star is, as I said, if the star is doing that, then you can infer the presence of the planet. So I gave my best reply. I went home that night, called everybody up. This is national news. I said, I'm going to be on TV and national news. And I tune in. The only part of that interview was me doing this. That's all they put. So I said, okay, they want sound bites. And so I worked to hand material in the format that they seek. And once I did that, other news organizations noticed it, and they started coming back. Documentarians came, and just the effort to be as good at it as I can be formed this interest. I would rather just stay home in the lab, but I feel a sense of duty to bring the universe down to earth for all those who are curious, because I can. And if I didn't, it would be disrespect for those who did it for me when I was coming up in the ranks.
Beautiful, beautiful. Vishrant from Dubai, yes, please, who's age 15, and Isabel, age 17, from Albania. They both just wanted to say thank you for making science accessible. And Isabel wants to tell you that her current GPA is 10 out of 10. And she credits you.
Wow, okay, well, great. That's higher than my GPA was, I'll tell you that, okay.
All right, Céline. Nusaiba, age 11, from Pakistan, wants to know if you think exploration of the sea is more important than the exploration of space. Why or why not? Whoa!
Go on. God, help me out here. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, we're listening.
No, well,
I feel no pressure whatsoever. So something I think we all have in common, whether it's those of us here on stage, whether it's the children asking the questions, or any of you here, is that it's an exploration of self. And I keep coming back to this because this debate of space versus ocean isn't actually the question. I think the question is, why are we doing it? Bill, you brought it up, right? Curiosity. We are curious about understanding ourselves, and we seek places outside ourselves for that understanding. For me, the real focus is going back in. Is it what are we seeking outside ourselves that we're not finding within? And when we talk about the universe, we talk about the cosmos, we talk about our oceans, we talk about Earth, we're constantly exploring. People have asked me over and over again, is there anything else left to see on our planet? Well, have you been everywhere? Because if you haven't, there's always something to explore. Because we're different in all the places that we go to. The bottom of the ocean or space might not be accessible to the majority of people, but something is, and nature gives us a clue to that when we give it space to do that. So I don't think the debate is space versus oceans. I think it's us, and how far is it that we can go in our own exploration, and having nature as our ally. We have that at our doorstep. We don't need to go far away. And I fully respect what everybody does, including bottom of the oceans, but I really think that if we stop for a moment and actually look within, we'll see that there's an infinite possibility within ourselves.
Scott, wasn't Alan Shepard our first astronaut? Doesn't he hold the record for the longest time spent under the sea? Was it Alan Shepard?
No, it wasn't Alan Shepard. It was
One of our early astronauts.
It was
who felt that space wasn't enough. Let me go under the water.
Yeah, it was one of the original 7.
One of the Mercury 7.
But it wasn't
Alan Shepard. Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't Alan Shepard. It wasn't Gordo. It wasn't Deke. It wasn't Wally. Who am I missing? There's 3 more. It was Scott Carpenter.
Scott Carpenter. Thank you, Scott Carpenter. So one of our earliest astronauts went into space and then went underground, under the waters, and he might still have the record for the longest sustained time.
Probably does. I've done a few missions in this Aquarius habitat as saturation diving as an aquanaut, this NASA program. I don't know if Jose ever did it. He did it too. So it's something that NASA recognizes the analogous nature of undersea exploration and how it relates to exploration of space. So,
And Kathy Sullivan, who was the first woman to do a spacewalk, has also been diving deep in the oceans.
and she was also the head of NOAA.
Yes.
Yes, she was. Yeah.
Girl power. Here's a kiddo I met in Poland back this September, and Veronica, age 16, asked you, Captain Kelly, what was the most challenging part of your year-long stay in space, both personally and technically?
Wow. So I would say the hardest thing about it was the duration, which kind of makes sense. I had flown 6 months prior to that mission, and that was a long time. 6 months was a long time. And I recognized that this was going to be actually almost twice as long. Actually, I think it turned out more than twice as long, because I didn't do an actual year, and my first long-duration flight wasn't quite 6 months. But it was just being in a confined place for a really long time, where you don't have the choice to go outside, to visit your friends, your family. And that's going to be a big challenge on Mars. I'm all for people going to Mars, but I think it has to be not a one-way trip. So that was Personally, challenging. Professionally, I would say that it's the work is challenging because oftentimes on a short space mission you can train right up to launch, and your training is very recent. But when you're in space for nearly a year, and you have to train for all the you can't train for all the activities that you're going to do. So some of the stuff becomes technically challenging because you just haven't been trained on it, or your training has been so far in the past that you've forgotten it. I've worked on experiments up on board the space station. They said I've had training on this, and I could not remember ever having it.
I have
Is
another.
that why it broke?
Probably, or maybe it just broke because I was doing it.
And I have another question for you, Captain Kelly. Charlie M, age 10 from Austin, wrote, if you could ask Ernest Shackleton one question about his expeditions, what would it be, and why is the title of your book both a characteristic of what an explorer should have and the name of Shackleton's boat?
Yeah. So, what question would I ask him? I have never thought about that. He's certainly a personal hero of mine. Let me answer the first question, or the second question first, as I try to think of the answer to the first. See if I can multitask that way. The reason I named my book Endurance was for three reasons, which was Shackleton's. His ship was named Endurance. He named it Endurance. It actually had another name previously. And the reason I did that was because of the duration of my mission. It was going to be the longest of a human or American astronaut in space. My own personal story, I think, is one of endurance. I didn't start off as a good student. I needed to find inspiration and motivation, and just, I don't have the same background as Jose, but mine is also kind of untraditional as well. I mean, most astronauts were like, they're the highest performing people in their class, went to a lot of times Ivy League schools or military academies. That was not me. So I thought my personal story, that name kind of captured that as well. And also the other reason was I just wanted to honor Ernest Shackleton. I don't know if you're aware, you can't copyright a title. So I could write a book and call it War and Peace if I wanted, and that's perfectly fine. But what question would I ask him? I would ask him where he found, the personal, inspiration to do the type of exploration he did at that time. Because, and I'll talk about this a little bit more, I think tomorrow, and they were not guaranteed to return. I mean, it was fairly likely that at least some of them were going to die. And some of them actually did. I don't think people are aware that on the Aurora, which was the ship on the other side of Antarctica that was going to pick them up, 3 of those people actually died. But Shackleton gets all the attention because no one died, right? I would ask him that
Aurora went to save him, and 3 people from them died?
No, there was 2 ships.
Right.
And they were going to be the ones that picked them up.
And people died on that ship, but not with Shackleton.
Correct. Well, actually, they died on the continent, but
Yeah.
But they were from that ship, yeah.
Well,
Shackleton, as I'm sure everybody here, maybe some of your audience knows, Shackleton captained a boat to Antarctica and was stuck in the ice, and he saved all his men by using the lifeboats, dragging them to the open sea. But Shackleton himself was a fascinating man. And the question I would have asked Shackleton, because he was the epitome of an explorer. He was within himself, taciturn, and yet kind. He was the ideal leader, and he never evidenced anxiety. It was his bravery, it was his courage, it was his encouragement of his men that kept them alive. And I would ask him, because he was the essence of an explorer, were you ever afraid?
do you guys know the Glennon Doyle quote, if you can't do something without fear, do it scared? Maybe that was, maybe his a bit of his own.
He never revealed any negative emotion. It was always positive, and it was an incredible force for the saving of, I believe it was 28 men that on the ship that nobody died. The ship ultimately, the Endurance, went through the ice and went to the bottom of the sea. Recently, they discovered the wreck of the Endurance.
Hey, Bill, you're stealing my story for tomorrow. I'm just saying.
Nobody,
Stealing my material.
nobody will be here. You don't have to worry about it.
Okay, canceled.
And I just have to give a shout out. Rhea from Pretoria, South Africa. She's 10. Says she really likes your book, Captain Kelly. All right. Astronaut Hernandez. Maria from age 11 from Madrid would love for you to tell us about your best experience you had in space.
Oh, wow. My best experience I had in space, I'll tell you, I believe, I was a flight engineer. And as Scott mentioned, it only takes 8.5 minutes to get up into space. And now you're in a microgravity environment going around the world once every 90 minutes. And my best experience is, you don't immediately, like your colleagues in the middeck, they immediately, once they reach orbit, they unbuckle their seat belts and they start transforming the middeck into a workable area. And you could hear them and kind of see them floating behind you and all that. And I'm with the two pilots, and we're doing silly things like activating life support systems and making sure the fuel valves are empty so they don't freeze over. And it's not until you go around the world once that you finally are able to unbuckle your seatbelt. And man, 0G on a continuous basis, 24/7 for 14 days, you never get tired of floating. I'm serious.
Did you barf?
I did not, no. I did not get space adaptation sickness, although I did barf when I came back home. I got 1G adaptation sickness. I'll admit to that. But going
1G
up,
made you barf.
But going up, I did not. But you're floating and you feel like a superhero because you're defying the laws of physics as we know them down here. And at first you're clumsy up there, but as the days wear on, you become very elegant and are able to glide through and do your best Superman impersonation.
Jose, you guys are superheroes.
Oh, thank you, thank you, appreciate it. But that's my favorite moment is being able to do that, and then looking down at our Earth, and you get that aha where you see, wow, you get one window to our Earth, another window to our universe, and you realize we're just a speck of dust in the grand scheme of things, and so you feel so humbled. I got chills when I first saw our Earth and saw our universe, and I said, wow.
I have to interject just as a physicist. When you're in 0G, Earth isn't down, it's just over there. Because there is no up or down.
You're right.
In 0G.
I stand corrected.
It's just there.
I stand corrected by the guy that hasn't gone to space.
So while we're being a little spicy, Tanisha, age 13 from Botswana, and Annika P. from California wants to know, we love your love for the ocean, but what have you done for it so far?
For me?
Yes. She's like, I love your love of the ocean, but what have you done? Out of the mouths of babes.
That's fantastic. I love it. So at the core of it, storytelling is sharing. Sharing is connecting. And without those connections, those who don't feel or who aren't close to the oceans, who don't get to see it, who don't get to sense it, that's the way to be able to transmit. So the interconnection of all things is where I try to inspire. I have worked on ocean documentaries for the past 20 years. And I will say I respect the question a lot because it brings me to the similar question from an indigenous man in the Amazon. we were going there to film. And he said, okay, well, that's great. What does it do for me? And I think this is for all of us with great intentions. He said, listen, he said, and when he says white people, I just want everyone to understand, for them, white is anybody on the outside, because those were the first invaders in. So he says, so your people, doctors come here and they want to study our medicinal plants. And they walk with our shamans in the jungle, and they take our plants and they take their notes, and then they go back and they make all your little white pills that solves all your diseases. Nothing comes back to us. And he says, and your anthropologists, they want to learn our culture and our people and our history and our language, and they come here and we give them our stories. We give them our legends. We give them our myths. We give them our souls. And they say, we will help you. And then they go away and they write their papers and their doctorates and whatnot. They get published, and we see nothing. And he points at me, he says, you are no different. You come here and you film and you take our stories, and you think the people watching are going to do anything about it? He says, you are wrong. They might feel, but we will see nothing. So in that moment, and I love the moments of being humbled, because it really, remember the story of the whale? It makes you feel small. Small isn't bad. Small is perspective. And so I looked at him and I said, oh my God, you're right. I'm coming here and I'm taking stories and I'm bringing them back to people, and I feel good about that. And the audience might feel good about seeing it and understanding, but what are we collectively doing about it? So my part is a small, tiny, humble piece of a much bigger puzzle that we're all a part of. But I play my part against all odds, and against being humbled and put back in my place over and over again to remind me, keep going forward, because that little piece matters in the grand scheme of things. And if we can't stand back up after that moment of being humbled, do something else. So for me, it's standing back up and doing it over and over again, and understanding, I by myself, I had a friend of mine who said, I'm so glad you're out there saving the planet. Like, are you kidding? Me by myself? That is insane. So we each have our part to play. And it's when we collectively put all those parts together that it makes a difference.
What the youth watching this should understand is that underneath the ocean is a whole other world, a world comparable to the one above water. There are mountains and peaks and valleys and life forces and entities living there that we know nothing about. The most extreme life lives there in 600 degrees Fahrenheit water with sulfur all around them. They live. There is the whole exploration of under the water that is equal to the exploration of space. So anybody interested in exploration of the Earth under the water is equally valid as in space.
Thank you.
I need to add to that, again, a bit of physics. It's way more dangerous to go to the bottom of the ocean than to go into orbit, because the pressure difference between the vacuum of space and whatever your capsule is pressurized to is at most 1 atmosphere. You go to the bottom of the ocean, it's 30, 50, 60 atmospheres difference. So the structure of your vessel, the risks you take, the engineering challenges to make that happen are way greater than space. So it could be that we know more about the moon because it's easier to get there than the bottom of the ocean.
I think I just got my backup crew here.
Nice.
I don't know. I think it's harder to get to the moon than the bottom of the ocean. I'm thinking about this.
It's more costly, but the physics of it is pretty easy.
You know, I get your point. You know, 14 psi versus, the psi at the bottom of the ocean is much more significant, but the getting there is a challenge. Surviving might be different.
Yes,
Getting
surviving.
is different.
So this question is for you, Jose. This is
That's a good point, because you could just... No. You can get to the bottom of the ocean just falling.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't need anything
Yeah, you don't need any energy to do
to
that.
get to the bottom of the
But your
ocean.
vessel has to be stronger.
Yeah, you would be dead, but you'll
Yeah.
get there with no effort. Yeah.
So Ivana from Monterrey, Mexico, who is 9 years old, wrote this. Hi, Jose. And hi, Neil. My family and I listen to your podcast. Back to Jose. Do you have any advice for girls who want to get into space but aren't U.S. citizens?
Yes, I think space is being more accessible to folks. I belong to an organization called Space for Humanity, and we had a competition to give a suborbital flight to someone, and one of those recipients was Katia Chavarete, a Mexican-born engineer from JPL, who experienced going
Jet Propulsion
to space.
Labs.
Yeah, Jet Propulsion Labs, who experienced going up into space. So my point here is that when I grew up, NASA was the only game in town to go up into space. Nowadays, we got different ways of getting into space. Right now, it's very expensive. That's why the foundation, with the agreement with Blue Origin, was able to give Katia that opportunity. But I believe, 20, 30 years from now, it's going to be a decision any individual with a middle income can make, whether do I buy a new car or do I go to space. So I think it's going to be eventually accessible to folks that really want to live that dream. And so the opportunities are only increasing.
Blue Origin has a dream of lifting polluting companies, polluting industries into geocentric orbit, 250 odd miles into space, pollute there where it won't count. People will live there and come back to a more pristine Earth every few weeks to vacation here. So they would work up there in polluting industries and live down here where Earth becomes more sacrosanct.
Wait, you work up there and then breathe down here? Don't you have to breathe up there too?
Yes, you do.
All right, Neil, this question is for you, and I love it so much. It's from Avner H10 from Nairobi, Kenya. And he said, my teacher told us about the Velo pulsar, and it sounds a little like a really crazy bumblebee or weird bongo drums. And then he played millisecond pulsars in 47 tuck, and it sounded like an orchestra warming up. But how? How can space have its own music if there's no sound up there?
Yeah, so there's a lot of that going on lately. And so the pulsar, any pulsar, is thusly named because its energy that we receive comes in pulses. And they're electromagnetic pulses, so it's radio waves, it's visible light. And it's possible to take those electromagnetic vibrations and convert them into sound. In fact, there are people who do this for the sight impaired, where how do you turn an image of the night sky into an acoustic map? And if it depends on how you tag certain frequencies of energy, of electromagnetic energy, with acoustic energy. And if you do that, you can turn it into sounds, and occasionally it might be what we would identify as music. But most of it is just noise. And so, sure, and it depends on how clever the person, not clever, how inventive the person is who maps the sound onto the electromagnetism. And if you're unfamiliar with that whole word, electromagnetism, we're very familiar with all the bands of light. There's radio waves and microwaves and infrared and red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, Roy G. Biv, then ultraviolet and X-rays and gamma rays. That whole spectrum is light, electromagnetic energy. And that's how we receive information from space. Otherwise, when they say, we heard sounds from space, no, we didn't. We see light from space and we turned it into sound.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. All right. This question goes back to Céline. She wants to know.
Who wants to know?
Oh, sorry. It is. I lost it and memorized the question. Okay. So this, I'll find her name here in a second in my notes. But she said that wanted to ask if your grandmother was really the first woman to scuba dive, and then she added, My grandmother has never even been to the ocean, but she does make really great cookies. So let me find her name.
Yes, my grandmother was the first woman to dive, and she did not cook except a steak for her dog. And I didn't see my grandmother ever diving. So for me, it does also remain a story. It's a much more internal story because it's family. But there were two generations of women before me who were on the boat and who were on expedition. But it was at a time that we didn't publicize it as much, and both of them were behind the cameras. So we don't hear those stories as much.
Fantastic. That was from Angelica, age 9, from Romania. Yeah, it's like the world is in fine shape if you're listening to these questions. Students are my absolute favorite. And I guess, Captain Kelly, this is from Antonio from Brazil, age 13, wants to know, how long after your 340 days in space did it take you for you to feel in good condition when you were back on Earth?
Yeah, it's interesting. I flew in space 4 times, 8 days, 13 days, 154, and then 340. And if you graph those, what is that called?
Exponential.
Well, something else? Second order polynomial.
Sure.
All right. So if I was to fly again, it would have to be like 5 years to match that curve. And the reason I bring this up is because when you come back, the time to recover from the space flight seems related to the duration. So my first flight, 8 days, felt back to normal in a few days. Second flight, 2 weeks, maybe took about a week and a half. Third flight, was more like 5 months, which was the duration of the mission. And then my last flight, it was more like 8 months. I kind of felt like it was 6. My wife said probably physically it was 6, but 8 months, to be like the same person I was, more mentally, emotionally, I think, to recover from it. But the physical effects can be significant, especially on my last flight. I mean, my legs, when I would stand up, would just swell up like water balloons. I had rashes and hives on anywhere my body had any pressure on it because it had not had any pressure for a long time. It was almost like an allergic reaction. You're tired. So you lose a lot of blood volume. And you get the volume back quickly. What you don't get back are the red blood cells. They take much longer to recover.
You're not being a good ambassador for people to go into space right now.
At least for a long time. And it's not for everyone. And what I will say is, I think the good thing about spaceflight and spaceflight in the future is there will be all different kinds of experiences. But living in space, I think, is not going to be for everybody because it is really challenging until you have something like artificial gravity, and the recovery can be very challenging.
Did you have that problem where you're drinking a cup of water, you just sort of let go of it?
On my first mission, that was only 8 days, I had this feeling that I wanted to let stuff float in front of me once I got back on Earth.
How many glasses did you break?
Yeah. I didn't break any, but I had a feeling I wanted to do that.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, though, the longer I spent in space, I had felt less of a tendency once I came back. And I think it's just because you recognize, you just get more familiar with the experience.
Astronaut Hoot Gibson tells a story that he had to buy Ray a whole new set of dishes because he kept doing that. So here, I know we're ending our time. There's so many questions out there, kiddos. I tried to get to as many as possible. They each, from teachers from Botswana to Myanmar, would love maybe a motivational minute from each of you to share with the students who will be the explorers of tomorrow. Can we start with you, Jose, and we'll work our way down, and then we'll conclude our program.
Sure. I always tell folks that it's okay to dream big. I encourage folks to dream big. In Spanish, is se vale soñar en grande. But you need to back it up with hard work and preparation. And if you're willing to do that, you can actually convert your dream into reality. Else it's just that, a dream. So work hard, prepare yourself, kids. Go to college, graduate school, and you too can reach for your own stars.
When I was young, I mentioned this before, And I've talked about it in the past, how I was not a good student. I wanted to be. You know, every year I would show up the first day of school thinking, this is the year I'm going to turn this around. I'm going to become a straight A student. And 3 days in, I was 3 days behind on homework, and that was the end of that year. And I'd start all over the next year. So for me, it was about inspiration. I needed to find the inspiration, the thing that I wanted to do that required me to get a good education. I had great intentions, but I could just never do it until I discovered Tom Wolfe's book, The Right Stuff, and it made me feel like I had a connection to the real people in that book. I had a lot in common with them, with one exception, and I was a bad student. And I actually believed, even though it sounds crazy, that if I could just fix that one thing about myself, maybe I could become, graduate from college someday. Maybe I could become, a Navy pilot. Maybe if not a Navy pilot, maybe an Air Force pilot. It's easier, right? Maybe a test pilot, maybe an astronaut someday, right? I actually believe that, and it happened. So for me, inspiration is important, and that's what's great about the other people on the stage as well. I mean, we try to and hopefully inspire kids that they can dream big and achieve their goals.
Céline?
I think at the center of all of it is to find what each one of us loves, because we can get a lot from the outside, a lot of influence, a lot of pressure. Teachers telling you grades are important, parents telling you, well, your grandfather was a doctor, you should be this. First, get rid of the shoulds. And for kids and young adults to start really looking at what it is that motivates them from the inside out as opposed from the outside in. And for the adults of those parents or anyone who is a mentor to kids, to encourage the kid to really figure out their authentic self first, because the goals and the vision, everything will come from that authentic place. So it is our responsibility to nourish that in kids, and for kids to seek those mentors and ask that of them, I think is really, really necessary. Yeah.
I don't know what I could possibly add to what's just come across the table here, other than I'd like to echo the earlier point about failure. Hardly anyone who is truly successful got there without some path of failure. And that's what distinguishes people who succeed from those who don't. If you really care about achieving that and you fail at it, try again. Try another way. Ask people. Work at it. Very little in life is truly worth achieving that doesn't require a significant investment of time, energy, emotional, physical investment of yourself. And without the love and the drive, I guess you could wander. Nothing wrong with wandering if the act of wandering is to find what it is that will be your guiding star. But once you find your guiding star, don't let anything get in the way, not even your own failure.
I would say, to the children that dreaming is really important. Dream. And in those dreams, you'll find the chord, the music that will tell you that's really what you want. So let your mind wander. Don't make any decisions early in life. Dream and wait for that chord within you to play, and you'll know that it's right.
Beautiful.
And because this is a season of merry and bright, Neil, would you tell everybody why we are Star Stuff?
Oh, sure. It turns out, for me, one of the greatest gifts of 20th century astrophysics to civilization is the discovery that the very elements that comprise life, especially the carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, right on up to iron, are traceable to the crucibles of the centers of stars. The centers of stars that have sufficient mass to manufacture those elements through thermonuclear fusion, starting with hydrogen to helium to carbon to nitrogen, all the way up the periodic table. If that's all it did, that would be of no use to us, except those very stars also explode, scattering that enrichment across the galaxy, enriching gas clouds so that subsequent generations of stars will have the ingredients that will enable the formation of planets, and on some planets, life. So that when you stand out and look up at the night sky, it's not simply that you are alive in the universe. The universe is alive within us. And that is a scientific discovery that borders on the spiritual. So when you look up and you say, I feel small, no, feel large, because your ingredients are shared among stars in that very night sky upon which you gaze.
From the iron in your blood to the calcium in your teeth to the carbon in your DNA, you're 100% star stuff. So on behalf of Future Space, Space2Sea Antarctica, myself, and the world, we would like to thank our illustrious guests. And I think this might be the appropriate way to sign off, right? Live long, prosper, and explore, everybody. Have a great day, and thank you for watching.
Everyone, this is historical. Live broadcast from the Drake Passage has never been done before. We live in a world now that we can do that. Technology, where we can share the wisdom of these inspiring and amazing individuals. So thank you very much, everyone, for being part of this groundbreaking moment. Thank you.